We are threatened with suffering from three directions: from our body, which is doomed to decay; from the external world, which may rage against us with overwhelming and merciless forces of destruction; and finally from our relations with other men. This last source is perhaps more painful to us than any other. Civilization and Its Discontents, published in 1930, was one of Sigmund Freud's final books, in which he addresses the issue of the relationship between the individual and society. Freud is famous as the founder of psychoanalysis, and his insights about the human psyche permanently altered the way in which the modern individual sees itself and also naturally its relationship with society. Freud had many interesting insights, the main one of which is the power of the unconscious mind. This understanding that even if we ourselves look within us, look within our internal world and our desires and our thoughts, we actually don't have full access to our own personality. Only a fragment of who we are and the unconscious forces that shape us is available to our personal vision. But a large part of our fears, our desires, our understandings, our assumptions, it's all hidden. And there's even a horizon in the internal world beyond which we cannot actually properly perceive. And he also saw human energy or human desires of like a kind of a psychic force that is flowing according to the structures that is created by our beliefs and our identities that we create for ourselves or that society pushes upon us. And that when there is obstructions and problems in how the psychic energy flows, that it is there that we will find the root of psychological problems or disturbances. And by his method of psychoanalysis, the therapist is an individual that guides the person through identifying and bringing these unconscious things to light and trying to adjust and change it to create a healthier psyche. Now, Freud had an interesting insight as the reality that when he looked towards the relationship between the individual and society, he could see that it is impossible to overlook the extent to which civilization is built upon a renunciation of instinct. So instinct is the natural desire of the conditioned being, the natural desire that comes with the physical body, which is the desire for pleasure and the willingness to do whatever it is to take it. Sex and aggression, sex and death, the two primal instincts in the natural world that we even see in the human being is definitely not free from that forces. Actually, quite the opposite, just as strong within us as it is within the animals. The only difference is that we have this overlay of culture, of another form of conditioning that then tries to shift and direct this level of instinctual sexual desire and aggression that is part of us. But Freud then looked at it and he could see that inevitably civilization will lead to suffering, because civilization is built upon the individual sacrificing or repressing his natural instincts for the sake of getting the protection of what society can give him. So what a paradox. We create society with its laws in order to help us in our pursuit of happiness. But it is this very renunciation of instinct that society requires of us that will lead us to be perpetually unhappy. Because how does society do this? Well, it cultures the individual with different ideas or laws and ultimately makes him feel guilty, makes him feel some guilt or remorse whenever his desires go beyond the boundaries of what society deems to be suitable. And in this way, the individual is in such a uncomfortable position. Now, Freud starts off the book from the very beginning with renouncing or distancing himself from what he sees to be the impossibility of the religious impulse to offer any solution to this paradox. Freud himself is an avowed atheist, and it was with great disdain that he looked at religion. And he starts off by sort of describing or giving his comments. What is said is to be sometimes described as the oceanic feeling that comes from proper spiritual practice, meaning that one has the ability, purportedly, through the religious practice, to extend one's self-identification, one's self-interest with others, and not just be a selfish individual. And that's the vision we see from saintly people. And that is the vision of most religious traditions, this understanding that the goal of religion, or one of the symptoms of properly practicing spirituality, is when one transcends this deep selfishness that we see within the animal world, and one comes to a point of being able to sacrifice for others willingly. And some or other, there's supposed to be some sense of happiness even that is in the sacrifice. But Freud, he didn't believe it, he couldn't experience it, and he didn't see it as a viable alternative. So naturally, we would then agree, yes, in the absence of that transcendental option, definitely human society becomes impossible. Because the lust and the consequent frustration that is there within a society that has no alternative, it will just completely build up and increase and cause both individual problems and social problems. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it is interesting that Krishna himself also says that repression is not an option. Even a man sadrisham chestate swasya prakriter jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature. For everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the material energy. What can repression accomplish? So it is a fact that repression is not an adequate strategy. It just does not work. But what then is the alternative? Well, if one adds the transcendental element, then what opens up is the possibility for sublimation, for the transmutation and the transformation of physical energy, of psychic energy, of desire, into spiritual energy by the process of yoga. And the various forms of yoga that is taught in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Vedic tradition is exactly that. It is forms of behavior and action, whether through ritual, through meditation, through practical service, through the process of worship, that one takes and uses physical substances, the physical body and the physical mind, and directs them towards transcendence, and then it becomes transformed into spiritual energy. And that allows the individual then to experience what Krishna calls a higher taste, that the Bhagavad Gita describes as a higher taste, a higher happiness that comes from transcending the limitations of the own physical body and mind, which is ultimately not our real identity. And this transcendental element is not just an additional feature to human society, but it is the core that makes human society possible. In the absence of that transcendental option, it is impossible to keep social cohesion, because people will just become increasingly frustrated and selfish, and then the very basis of human society collapses. While sublimation is then explained to be the positive alternative, we also agree that it is not easy. And in actual fact, it is the greatest heroism to be able to overcome selfish desire. Dandanyasa param dhanam kamatyagastapasmritam swabhava vijaya sauryam satyam cha samadarshanam. The greatest charity is to give up aggression towards others. Real austerity is the renunciation of lust. Real heroism is to conquer one's natural instinct to control and exploit. And the truth is seeing the happiness of all others as being just as like one's own. So therefore, it is an act of heroism, in the real sense, to transcend selfishness, but that is what is required. And that is what the tradition of bhakti, the tradition of the Bhagavatam is calling the individual for. Because it is that pursuit of transcendence that is central, not just to the happiness of the individual, but also to the maintenance and creation of human culture and all the benefits and protection that comes from a society that is properly functioning.